Okay, guys, we are back here with our North Carolina Coach Book. We are working on our science review, and we are going to be on page 88 if you want to follow along. And we are doing unicellular and multicellular organisms. You will need your packet here to follow along if you so choose. Okay, so I'm going to start reading unicellular and multicellular organisms. Plants and animals are made up of millions of tiny parts called cells. Many other living things are also made up of one cell. Yet both types of living things carry out the basic process of life. Cells are the basic building blocks of all living things or organisms. A cell is the smallest part of a living thing that can carry out all of the processes of life. For example, cells take in nutrients, the materials they need to live and grow. They also get rid of waste, materials they cannot use. Most cells are too small to be seen without a microscope. You can observe the shapes of some plant cells through handheld lens, but you cannot see the tiny structures or parts inside each cell. Scientists learned about cells after microscopes were invented. They learned that cells contain even tinier structures. These tinier structures perform different jobs or functions to keep the cells alive. So the first thing here, it says cells, the basic building blank of living things. Cells is look at the very thing, basic building blocks of living things. Are the smallest part that carry all processes of life, such as taking in blank and getting rid of waste. They take in nutrients and getting rid of waste. The blank of some plant cells can be seen with a hand's lens, but a blank is needed for most cells. So a blank of some plant cells. You can observe the shapes of some plant cells through a hand's lens. So what can we observe? We can observe the shape. So on our packet here, this is shape. The shape of some plant cells can be seen with a hand's lens, but a blank is needed for most cells. What do you need? A microscope. Is needed for most cells and the tiny structures inside them. Blank or single-cell organisms such as bacteria, amoebas, and other things make up of only blank cells that allow them to move. We have not gotten to that part right there. Okay. Unicellular organisms. A unicellular organism is made up of only one cell. These single-cell organisms include bacteria, amoebas, and others. They are simple forms of life, but they carry out the basic process of life. They move, find food, and grow. They also reproduce or make more organisms of their own kind. However, not all single-celled organisms have the same structures. Bacteria are a very large group of single-cell organisms. They are much smaller than these cells that make up plants and animals. So if we look over here, and it says blank or single-cell organism. So what was that called? Sorry, now I can't even say it. Unicellular organisms. Okay, so when we're looking at our thing and it says a unicellular or single-cell organism such as bacteria, amoebas, and Others are made up of only blank cells. How many? Uni. It's like Uno. And when you call Uno, how many cards do you have? One, right? So one cell that allows them to move, find food, grow, and reproduce. Amoebas move and capture food by changing blank. So we have not gotten to more about amoebas here. So now we're on page 89. So if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to. An amoeba is another kind of single-cell organisms. An amoeba eats by surrounding a food particle and then bringing the food into the cell. It moves by changing its shape. Okay, so like it grabs it, so it has to change its shape in order to do that. Look at the ungula below. The ungula is a single-cell organism with a whip-like part that moves it forward. A paramecium has many hair-like structures that helps it move. The paramecium also uses these structures to help it take in food. A paramecium is large enough that you can see it with just your eyes, but it will look like a tiny speck. To see its details, you will need to use a microscope. The diagram below shows what a paramecium looks like when it is magnified many times. So, let's look at about our amoebas, right? Our amoebas move and capture food by changing its, what did we say it changed? What did it do? It changed its shape. Ungula have whip-like parts that make it blank forward. It helps it move forward. Paramecium have many blank structures that help it move and take in food. So paramecium have, what do they have? Hair-like structures that help move and take in food. Blank can be seen without a microscope, but you can't see the details. So what can be seen without a microscope? Look at that line. Look at down here. A paramecium. Paramecium. A paramecium can be seen without a microscope, but you can't see the details. Paramecium and most bacteria take in food, but some singular organisms like blank and ungulas use blank to make food. So we're going to look down right here in our last paragraphs of the page here. Paramecium and most bacteria must take in food, but some single-cell organisms use sunlight to make food. These include single-celled algae and ungulas. All living things must get rid of waste and reproduce. Single-celled organisms remove waste by moving them to the outside of their cells. They reproduce by splitting it into two cells. The new organism is a copy of its parent. So, right here, paramecium and most bacteria take in food, but some single organisms like, what does it do? Algae, A-L-G-A-E, and ungulas use what to make food? What do they use? Sunlight. To use food. Single-celled organisms remove waste by moving them to the outside of their cells and reproduce blank. So we've not gotten how they get rid of their waste. So we're going to go over to the next page. Wait, is that single cell still? Yeah, it still says single cells because we're moving on to multi. So it must have gotten, oh, I'm sorry, it was on the very last line here. Single-cell organisms remove waste by moving them to the outside of their cells. They were reproduced by splitting into two cells. The new organism is a copy of its parents. So, single-cell organisms remove waste by moving them to the outside of the cell, and they reproduce by blank into two cells. They reproduce by splitting into two cells, creating a copy of the parent. Now we're at the multicellular. Okay, multicellular. Multicellular, almost all single-cell organisms are microscopic, too small to be seen without a microscope. The plants and animals of other living things you can see around are multicellular. A multicellular organism is made up of more than one cell. Multicellular organisms are much more complex than a single-cell organisms. Humans, dogs, fish, and trees are all multicellular. A multicellular organism is made up of different kinds of cells. The diagram below shows examples of some different cells in the human body. So we have our nerve cell, our red blood cells, our bone cells, our muscle cells, and our fat cells. Each kind of cell does a different job. Each has a shape and a structure that helps it do its job. Look at the nerve cell in the diagram above. Much of the cell is long and thin, like a telephone wire. Its job in the body is to send information. Its shapes helps it send signals to other cells. Groups of cells in the same type work together to perform certain functions. For example, muscle cells in your heart work together to pump blood and other cells throughout your body. So, multicellular organisms such as plants, and other living things. So, what plants and, second line there, animals, and other living things you can see without a microscope are made up of more than one cell and are much more blank than a single cell organisms. They are much more complex than a single cell organisms. These organisms are made up of different kinds of cells that have a shape and blank that help them do their job. They have a shape and a structure that help them do their job. Groups of cells of the same type, like muscles in your cells in your heart, that pump blood to work other cells. Work blank to perform certain functions. Okay, work. What do? If they work together to perform certain functions. Blank organisms cannot take in and give off material directly from their surroundings. Okay, so did you know the human body is made up of 210 different types of cells? One-cell organisms takes in material directly from their surroundings. They give off waste in the same way. But in plants and in animals, only surface cells can take in nutrients or give off waste. Plants and animals must have systems for moving materials through their bodies. A system is a group of parts that work together. Many plants have tubes that carry water and nutrients. The blood cells in your body carry oxygen and other nutrients through tubes called blood vessels. In the next lesson, you will learn about systems of the human body. These systems carry materials and information from one part of the body to another. Other animals also have body systems. Some are very much like those in humans, and some are quite different, but they are all made up of cells. So, looking at this, blank organisms cannot take in and give off material directly from their surroundings. So, If one-cell organisms take in material directly from their surroundings, they give off waste the same way. This says right here, blank organisms cannot take in. So if one-celled organisms take it in, what doesn't take it in? Multicellular. Cannot take in and give off materials directly from their surroundings, like unicellular organisms. Instead, plants and animals have blank, a group of parts that work together. Plants and animals must have a system of moving materials through the body, a system of parts that works together. Many plants have tubes that carry waters and nutrients. Blood cells in your body carry blood vessels. So what do these things have? They have a system, a group of parts that work together to move materials and information throughout their bodies. Okay, now we're looking at our 4 questions in our lesson review. Number 1, how do bacteria compare with humans? A, both are unicellular organisms. B, both are multicellular organisms. C, only bacteria are multicellular organisms. Or D, only humans are multicellular organisms. Think about what bacteria is. Is it a unicellular or a multicellular? Go back into your notes if you don't remember. Think about what humans are. Are they unicellular or are they multicellular? And make that decision. Think about what both of them are in order to make this decision. Okay. Number 2, using tubes made up of cells is one way plants A, transport water through the organism. B, make more organisms of their own kind. C, transport blood cells through the organisms. Or D, take in nutrients and make food. Using tubes made up of cells is one way plants. Keyword there is plants. So I'm going to tell you right now, you probably could rule 1 out because there's just not that in that organisms. But if you don't remember, go back and look at the plants and what it takes into it. Number 3, which of these is not made up of one or more cells? A rock, a paramecium, an earthworm, or a fern? Which one is not made up of one or more cells? Think about what it has to have in order to have cells. Okay. And number 4, which of these is a unicellular organism? A goldfish, a seaweed, an amoeba, or a tree? Which of these is a unicellular organism? So it has one cell. So take a moment. If you don't remember, go back and look at your notes.